From the halls of justice, his power did soar. J.Edgar Hoover, a legend of yore. In the corridors of power, he held his stride. With secrets in hand, and shadows to hide. A titan of law, yet a master of intrigue. Hoover's tale captivates, from age to age. In the dance of truth and lies, he presides. His legacy enduring, where darkness resides. Through BOI to FBI, his reign held fast. For nearly 5 decades, his shadow cast. But behind the facade of justice and might, lay a man of complexities, hidden from sight. From whispers in alleys to whispers in halls, Hoover's name echoes, as history recalls. In the annals of power, his story unfolds. A legend, a mystery, still waiting to be told. J.Edgar Hoover. John Edgar Hoover, January 1, 1895 to May 2, 1972, was an American law enforcement administrator who served as the final director of the Bureau of Investigation, BOI, and the first director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. In 1924, President Calvin Coolidge appointed Hoover as director of the Bureau of Investigation, BOI, the predecessor of the FBI. After 11 years in office, Hoover was crucial in establishing the FBI in June 1935, where he served as director for an additional 37 years until his death in May 1972, for a total of 48 years managing both the BOI and the FBI under 8 presidents. Later in life and after his death, Hoover became a divisive figure as evidence of his covert abuses of power emerged. He was also found to have consistently broken both the FBI's own procedures and the laws it was charged with upholding, as well as collecting evidence through illegal surveillance, eavesdropping, and burglaries. As a result, Hoover accumulated significant authority and was able to coerce and threaten political figures, including high-ranking officials. Early life and education. Hoover was born on New Year's Day 1895 in Washington, D.C., to Anna Marie, née Sheitlin, 1860–1938, and Dickerson Naylor Hoover, 1856–1921, the chief of the printing section of the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey and a former plate maker for the same institution. Dickerson Hoover was of English and German descent. Hoover's maternal great-uncle, John Hitz, was the Swiss honorary consul general in the United States. Among his family members, he was closest to his mother, who, although being more inclined to instruction, showed enormous devotion for her son. Hoover was born at a house on Seward Square, near Eastern Market in Washington's Capitol Hill neighborhood, which is now Capitol Hill United Methodist Church. He has a stained glass window in the church dedicated to him. Hoover did not have a birth certificate filed when he was born, even though it was required in Washington in 1895. 2 of his siblings had certificates, but Hoover's wasn't filed until 1938, when he was 43. Hoover spent his entire life in Washington, D.C. He attended Central High School, where he sang in the chorus, joined the Reserve Officers Training Corps, and competed on the debate team. During debates, he fought against granting women the right to vote and abolishing the death sentence. The school newspaper praised his cool, relentless logic. Hoover stammered as a youngster, which he eventually learned to manage by teaching himself to speak quickly, a technique he maintained throughout his adult life. He eventually spoke so quickly that stenographers struggled to keep up. Hoover was 18 years old when he accepted his first job, as an entry-level messenger in the Library of Congress's Orders Department. The library was half a mile from his residence. The event influenced both Hoover and the development of FBI profiles. As Hoover stated in a 1951 letter, "This job trained me in the value of collating material. It prepared me well for my position in the FBI, where information and proof must be gathered." In 1916, Hoover earned a Bachelor of Laws from George Washington University Law School, where he was a member of the Alpha Nu chapter of the Kappa Alpha Order, a Southern fraternity founded to carry on the legacy of the incomparable flower of Southern knighthood following the Confederacy's defeat in 1865. Some noteworthy Kappa Alpha graduates who influenced Hoover's future opinions included author Thomas Dixon and John Temple Graves. In 1917, Hoover earned a Master of Laws from the same university. While a law student, Hoover got intrigued in Anthony Comstock, the New York City U.S. postal inspector who fought long-running campaigns against fraud, vice, pornography, and birth control. Department of Justice. War Emergency Division. The Justice Department hired Hoover to work in the War Emergency Division immediately after he received his Master of Laws degree. He accepted the clerkship on July 27, 1917, at the age of 22. The position paid $990 per year, $23,500 in 2024 dollars, and was exempt from the draft. Hoover quickly became the head of the division's Alien Enemy Bureau, which was empowered by President Woodrow Wilson at the start of World War I to arrest and imprison alleged disloyal foreigners without trial. He was given greater authority under the 1917 Espionage Act. The Bureau apprehended 98 of the 1,400 suspected Germans living in the United States and labeled 1,172 as arrestable. The Radical Division is led by the Bureau of Investigation. In August 1919, the 24-year-old Hoover was appointed head of the Bureau of Investigation's new General Intelligence Division, also known as the Radical Division because its mission was to monitor and disrupt the activities of domestic radicals. America's first Red Scare was underway, and one of Hoover's first responsibilities was to carry out the Palmer raids. Hoover and his selected assistant, George Roosh, kept track of a number of radicals in the United States with the goal of punishing, arresting, or deporting those whose ideologies they deemed harmful. Clarification needed. During this period, targets included Marcus Garvey, Rose Pastor Stokes, and Cyril Briggs, Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman, and future Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, whom Hoover described as the most dangerous man in the United States. In 1920, Edgar Hoover, then 25, was initiated as a Freemason at Washington, D.C.'s Federal Lodge No. 1. He then joined the Scottish Rite, becoming a 33rd degree Inspector General Honorary in 1955. Chief of the Bureau of Investigation. Hoover was promoted to Deputy Director of the Bureau of Investigation in 1921, and the Attorney General appointed him Interim Director in 1924. On May 10, 1924, President Calvin Coolidge appointed Hoover as the 5th Director of the Bureau of Investigation, largely in response to claims that the previous director, William J. Burns, was engaged in the Teapot Dome affair. When Hoover took over the Bureau of Investigation, it employed around 650 people, including 441 special agents. Hoover sacked all female agents and prohibited further recruiting of them. Hoover's leadership style was not always consistent. He routinely fired bureau agents, including those he thought looked stupid like truck drivers or were pinheads. He also transferred agents who had dissatisfied him to career-ending duties and places. Melvin Purvis was a prime example. Purvis was one of the most effective agents in apprehending and dismantling 1930s gangs, and it is claimed that Hoover pushed him out of the bureau because he was envious of Purvis' widespread public recognition. In December 1929, Hoover commanded the protection detail for the Japanese naval delegation, which was visiting Washington, D.C., on their way to negotiate the 1930 London Naval Treaty. U.S. Secretary of State Henry L. Stimson and Japanese Ambassador Katsuji Debuchi received the Japanese delegation at Washington Union Train Station. The Japanese team then went to the White House to meet with President Herbert Hoover. Gangsters of the 1930s. In the early 1930s, criminal groups committed a huge number of bank robberies throughout the Midwest. They used their superior firepower and quick getaway vehicles to evade local law enforcement and avoid arrest. Many of these criminals made frequent newspaper headlines around the United States, particularly John Dillinger, who became well known for leaping over bank cages and escaping from jails and police traps. The gangsters had some sympathy in the Midwest, as banks and bankers were commonly regarded as oppressors of ordinary people during the Great Depression. The thieves worked over state boundaries, and Hoover lobbied for their crimes to be classified as federal charges, giving him and his men the right to pursue them and claim credit for apprehending them. Initially, the Bureau had some embarrassing gaffes, particularly with Dillinger and his collaborators. A raid on a vacation lodge named Little Bohemia in Manitowish Waters, Wisconsin, left a Bureau agent, a civilian bystander was killed, and several others were injured. All of the criminals fled. Hoover recognized his job was on the line, so he went out all the stops to catch the criminals. In late July 1934, Special Agent Melvin Purvis, the director of operations in the Chicago office, obtained a tip on Dillinger's whereabouts, which proved useful when Dillinger was apprehended, ambushed, and killed by Bureau operatives outside the Biograph Theater. Hoover was credited with orchestrating several high-profile arrests or shootings of outlaws and bank thieves. These included those of Machine Gun Kelly in 1933, Dillinger in 1934, and Alvin Karpis in 1936, which resulted in the Bureau's powers being expanded. In 1935, the Bureau of Investigation changed its name to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. It wasn't only a name change. A tremendous lot of restructuring was completed. In reality, Hoover went to the lab of Canadian forensic scientist Wilfred Durome twice, in 1929 and 1932, to design the establishment of his own FBI laboratory in the United States. It was the knowledge obtained from these visits that enabled him to turn the BOI into the FBI in 1935. In 1939, the FBI became preeminent in domestic intelligence, thanks in large part to reforms made by Hoover, such as increasing and consolidating fingerprint files in the Identification Division and compiling the greatest collection of fingerprints to date. Hoover also helped to increase the FBI's recruitment and created the FBI Laboratory, a section founded in 1932 to study and analyze material discovered by the FBI. American Mafia. Hoover consistently denied the existence of organized crime in the 1930s, despite numerous organized crime shootings as mafia groups fought for control of the lucrative profits generated by illegal alcohol sales during Prohibition, and later for control of prostitution, illegal drugs, and other criminal enterprises. Many writers believe Hoover's denial of the mafia's existence, as well as his failure to use the full force of the FBI to investigate it, were motivated by mafia gangsters Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello's possession of embarrassing photographs of Hoover with his protege, FBI Deputy Director Clyde Tolson. Other writers claim Costello corrupted Hoover by passing on horse racing tips through a mutual acquaintance, gossip journalist Walter Winchell. Hoover was regarded as an inveterate horseplayer and would send special agents to place $100 wagers on his behalf. Hoover allegedly stated that the Bureau had much more important functions than catching bookmakers and gamblers. Although Hoover established the FBI's reputation for arresting bank robbers in the 1930s, his primary interest had always been communist infiltration, and throughout the Cold War, he was able to direct the FBI's attention to these investigations. From the mid-1940s until the mid-1950s, he gave little attention to criminal vice rackets such as illegal drugs, prostitution, and extortion, bluntly denying the existence of the mafia in the United States. In the 1950s, evidence of the FBI's hesitation to investigate the mafia sparked public outrage. Following the 1957 Appalachian Crime Boss Summit, Hoover could no longer deny the existence of a national crime syndicate. In fact, Cosa Nostra's dominance over the syndicate's numerous branches carrying out illegal activities across North America prevailed, and this was widely published in popular newspapers and publications. Hoover established the Top Hoodlum program and targeted the syndicate's senior bosses around the country. Investigating subversion and radicalism. Hoover was concerned about what he called subversion, and under his supervision, the FBI investigated tens of thousands of suspected subversives and radicals. According to detractors, Hoover exaggerated the dangers of these accused subversives and frequently went above his authority in his pursuit of eradicating that believed threat. William G. Hundley, a Justice Department prosecutor, remarked that Hoover's investigations helped the American Communist movement survive because informants were nearly the only ones that paid the party dues. Due to the FBI's persistent targeting, PUSA membership had plummeted to less than 10,000 by 1957, with approximately 1,500 serving as FBI informants. U-boat landings in Florida and on Long Island. Beginning in the late 1930s, the FBI investigated rings of German saboteurs and spies, and counterespionage was its major task. The first arrests of German agents occurred in 1938 and continued throughout World War II. During World War II, German U-boats landed two small groups of Nazi spies in Florida and Long Island to carry out sabotage actions within the country. The two teams were captured after one of the operatives informed the FBI of everything. He was also charged and convicted. Illegal wiretapping. During this time period, President Franklin D. Roosevelt granted qualified approval to wiretap suspected subversive activities. He went on to say in 1941 that the United States Attorney General had to be notified of its use in each case. The Attorney General, Robert H. Jackson, left it to Hoover to decide how and when to deploy wiretaps, as he regarded the whole business repulsive. Francis Biddle, Jackson's successor as Attorney General, did turn down Hoover's requests on occasion. Covert espionage finds. In the late 1930s, President Franklin D. Roosevelt tasked Hoover with investigating both foreign espionage in the United States and internal communist and fascist operations. When the Cold War began in the late 1940s, the FBI under Hoover conducted extensive monitoring of communists and other left-wing activists in the United States. The FBI also took part in the Venona Project, a pre-World War II collaborative effort with the British to intercept Soviet spies in the United Kingdom and the United States. They were unaware that espionage was taking place, but the Soviets' repeated use of one-time pad ciphers, which are unbreakable with a single usage, resulted in redundancies that allowed some intercepts to be deciphered. These confirmed that espionage was being carried out. Hoover held the intercepts, America's most important counterintelligence secret, in a locked safe in his office. He chose not to alert President Truman, Attorney General J. Howard McGrath, or Secretaries of State Dean Acheson and George Marshall while they were in office. He told the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, about the Venona Project in 1952. Plans to strengthen the FBI's global intelligence capabilities. Following World War II, Hoover pursued plans to establish a worldwide intelligence service. The Truman government refused to approve these initiatives. Truman rejected the proposal. Growing bureaucratic competitors resented the consolidation of authority inherent in the plans, and there was widespread opposition to establishing an American equivalent of the Gestapo. Plans to suspend habeas corpus. In 1946, Attorney General Tom C. Clark directed Hoover to prepare a list of allegedly disloyal Americans who may be held during a wartime national emergency. In 1950, at the start of the Korean War, Hoover proposed to President Truman suspending habeas corpus and detaining 12,000 Americans suspected of disloyalty. Truman did not implement the idea. COINTELPRO in the 1950s. In 1956, Hoover was growing increasingly unhappy with U.S. Supreme Court decisions that curtailed the Justice Department's power to pursue people based on their political beliefs, particularly communists. Some of his associates said that he purposefully inflated the threat of communism to ensure financial and public support for the FBI. At the time, he established COINTELPRO, a secret, dirty tricks program. COINTELPRO was originally employed to disrupt the Communist Party USA, where Hoover directed the observation and pursuit of targets ranging from suspected citizen spies to larger celebrity figures like as Charlie Chaplin, whom he perceived as promoting Communist Party propaganda. COINTELPRO used infiltration, burglaries, illegal wiretaps, fake documents, and false rumors about important members of target groups. Some authors have claimed that COINTELPRO strategies included instigating violence and planning killings. This program continued in force until it was made public in 1971, following the heist of many internal records from an office in Media, Pennsylvania, by a group of 8 activists, at which point COINTELPRO became the target of some of the sharpest criticism of Hoover and the FBI. The United States Senate Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with Respect to Intelligence Activities, known as the Church Committee, after its chairman, Senator Frank Church, Democrat Idaho, investigated COINTELPRO's activities in 1975. The committee declared COINTELPRO's activities illegal and opposed to the Constitution. Hoover wielded considerable authority by compiling files holding vast amounts of incriminating and potentially embarrassing information on many influential individuals, particularly politicians. According to Lawrence Silberman, appointed Deputy Attorney General in early 1974, FBI Director Clarence M. Kelly believed such papers did not exist or had been destroyed. After the Washington Post published a story in January 1975, Kelly looked for them in his outer office. The House Judiciary Committee then ordered Silberman testify about them. Reaction to civil rights organizations. Several years before he attacked Martin Luther King Jr., Hoover had a public confrontation with T.R.M. Howard, a civil rights leader from Mound Bayou, Mississippi. During a national speaking tour, Howard blasted the FBI for failing to adequately investigate the racially motivated murders of George W. Lee, Lamar Smith, and Emmett Till. Hoover wrote an open letter to the press, labeling these statements irresponsible. In the 1960s, Hoover's FBI kept track of John Lennon, Malcolm X, and Muhammad Ali. COINTELPRO tactics were eventually applied against organizations including the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and others. Hoover's actions against those who maintained links with subversive groups, some of whom were members of the civil rights movement, sparked charges of attempting to harm their reputations. Examples include the treatment of Martin Luther King Jr. and actress Jean Seberg. Jacqueline Kennedy reported that Hoover told President John F. Kennedy that King attempted to organize a sex party while in Washington for the March on Washington, and that Hoover told Robert F. Kennedy that King made insulting remarks at the president's funeral. Under Hoover's supervision, the FBI sent an anonymous blackmail letter to King in 1964, stating that there is only one thing left for you to do, which King understood as an invitation to attempt suicide. In a 2013 interview with the Academy of Achievement, King's aide Andrew Young claimed that the main source of tension between the SCLC and the FBI was the government agency's lack of black agents, and that both parties were willing to cooperate by the time the Selma to Montgomery marches occurred. In one event in 1965, white civil rights activist Viola Liuzzo was slain by Ku Klux Klansmen who chased her down and shot into her car after realizing her passenger was a young black guy. One of the Klansmen was Gary Thomas Rowe, a confirmed FBI agent. The FBI spread suspicions about Liuzzo being a member of the Communist Party and had abandoned her children to engage in sexual encounters with African Americans active in the civil rights struggle. According to FBI archives, Hoover personally transmitted these insinuations to President Lyndon Johnson. Hoover also personally ordered the suspension of the federal investigation into the 1963 16th Street Baptist Church bombing by Ku Klux Klan members, which murdered 4 girls. By May 1965, local investigators and the FBI had identified bombing suspects and witnesses, which they conveyed to Hoover. The 4 suspects were not prosecuted, despite the fact that the evidence was supposedly so strong that even a white Alabama jury would convict. There was a history of distrust between local and federal investigators. Hoover said in a memo that the odds of conviction were slim, and he instructed his investigators not to disclose their findings with federal or state prosecutors. In 1968, the FBI formally terminated its investigation into the bombing without charging any of the named suspects. Hoover ordered the files sealed. According to William C. Sullivan, in 1970, Hoover personally authorized black bag jobs against the Weather Underground. Late career and death. Kenneth Ackerman, one of his biographers, argued that the claim that Hoover's secret files prevented presidents from firing him is a myth. However, Richard Nixon was recorded in 1971 saying that one of the reasons he didn't fire Hoover was fear of Hoover's retaliation against him. Similarly, Presidents Harry Truman and John F. Kennedy considered removing Hoover as FBI director, but decided that the political cost would be too high. In 1964, Hoover's FBI looked into Jack Valenti, a special assistant and confidant of President Lyndon Johnson who was married to Johnson's personal secretary but allegedly had a gay connection with a commercial photographer acquaintance. Hoover personally oversaw the FBI's investigation into the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. President Lyndon B. Johnson waived the then mandatory U.S. government service retirement age of 70 in 1964, allowing Hoover to remain FBI director for an indefinite period of time. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations produced a report criticizing the FBI, the Warren Commission, and other agencies. The report criticized the FBI's, Hoover's, failure to adequately explore the possibility of a conspiracy to assassinate the president. When Richard Nixon took president in January 1969, Hoover had just turned 74. There was rising consensus in Washington, D.C., that the old FBI director should retire, but Hoover's authority and congressional connections remained too powerful to force him to do so. Hoover remained director of the FBI until his death from a heart attack in his Washington home on May 2, 1972, at which point operational responsibility of the Bureau was given to Associate Director Clyde Tolson. On May 3, 1972, Nixon selected L. Patrick Gray, a Justice Department officer with no FBI experience, as acting director of the FBI, and W. Mark Felt as associate director. Hoover's body laid in state in the rotunda of the United States Capitol, where Chief Justice Warren Burger praised him. According to the New York Daily News, Hoover was previously the only public servant to have lay in state. At the time, the New York Times stated that this was an honor accorded to only 21 persons before, of whom 8 were presidents or former presidents. President Nixon offered another eulogy at the funeral service at the National Presbyterian Church. Hoover was also referred to as one of the giants, whose long life brimmed over with magnificent achievement and dedicated service to this country which he loved so well. Hoover was interred in the Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C., among his parents and a sister who died as an infant. Legacy. Biographer Kenneth D. Ackerman characterizes Hoover's legacy as follows. For better or worse, he transformed the FBI into a contemporary, national organization that values professionalism and scientific criminal combat. For most of his life, Americans regarded him as a hero. He popularized the G-Man brand to the point where becoming an FBI agent was more difficult than getting into an Ivy League college. Hoover tried to improve the FBI's image in American media. He was a consultant to Warner Brothers for a theatrical film about the FBI, The FBI Story, 1959, and in 1965 for Warner's long-running spin-off television series, The FBI. According to U.S. President Harry S. Truman, Hoover turned the FBI into his own private covert police force. We don't want the Gestapo or secret police. The FBI is heading in that direction. They are involved in sex life scandals and outright blackmail. J.Edgar Hoover would give his right eye to take control, and every congressman and senator is terrified of him. Because Hoover's acts were perceived as abuses of authority, FBI directors are now confined to a single 10-year tenure. The United States Senate may grant an extension. Jacob Heilbrunn, a journalist and senior editor at the National Interest, provides a mixed appraisal of Hoover's legacy. There is no doubt that Hoover's record is mixed, but I do not believe he was a demon. He's constantly accused of being virulently anti-communist, as if this were just a manifestation of his paranoia. But, if anything, he was not vigilant enough in detecting communist infiltration in the Roosevelt administration. We now know from KGB archives that there were dozens, if not hundreds, of KGB informants operating within the government. He's also frequently accused of infringing on people's civil liberties, yet in reality, Hoover opposed President Nixon's wiretapping policies. The J.Edgar Hoover Building, named after Hoover, serves as the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Because of the contentious nature of Hoover's legacy, both Republicans and Democrats have proposed bills in the House and Senate to rename it. The first such suggestion came just 2 months after the building's completion. On December 12, 1979, Gilbert Goode, a Republican congressman from Maryland, introduced H.R. 11137, which would have changed the name of the structure from the J. Edgar Hoover FBI Building to just the FBI Building. However, neither that measure nor Goode's two subsequent attempts advanced beyond committee. Another notable attempt occurred in 1993, when Democratic Senator Howard Metzenbaum campaigned for a name change following a fresh report concerning Hoover's ordered loyalty investigation of future Senator Quentin Burdick. In 1998, Democratic Senator Harry Reid proposed an amendment to remove Hoover's name from the building, arguing that J. Edgar Hoover's name on the FBI building is a stain on the building. The Senate did not approve the amendment. The building is aging and deteriorating, and its naming may be rendered obsolete when the FBI relocates its offices to a new suburban location. Hoover's practice of breaching civil liberties in the name of national security has been called into question in light of modern national surveillance programs. On April 21, 2015, the Institute of World Politics hosted a lecture titled Civil Liberties and National Security. Did Hoover get it right? Private life. Pets. Hoover's parents gave him his first dog as a child, and he's never been without one since. Throughout his life, he owned numerous dogs and became an expert in pedigree breeding, particularly Cairn Terriers and Beagles. He gifted many dogs to important persons, including Presidents Herbert Hoover, not related, and Lyndon B. Johnson, and buried 7 canine companions at Aspen Hill Memorial Park in Silver Spring, Maryland, including a Cairn Terrier named Speed a Bozo. Sexuality. Rumors emerged in the 1940s that Hoover, then in his early 40s and still living with his mother, was homosexual. Historians John Stuart Cox and Ethan G. Theoharis speculated that Clyde Tolson, who became Hoover's assistant director in his mid-40s and later became his principal heir, had a sexual relationship with him until the latter died. Hoover allegedly pursued and threatened anyone who drew inferences about his sexuality. Truman Capote, who enjoyed spreading scandalous rumors about Hoover, once said that he was more interested in getting Hoover mad than finding out whether the stories were genuine. Screw made the first print allusion to Hoover's sexuality on May 2, 1969, with the title, "Is J. Edgar Hoover a Fag?" Some acquaintances and researchers discount rumors regarding Hoover's sexuality, particularly those about his relationship with Tolson, as implausible, while others describe them as probable or even confirmed. Other scholars have reported the rumors without providing a viewpoint. Cox and Theoharis stated, "The strange likelihood is that Hoover never knew sexual desire at all." Anthony Summers, author of Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover, 1993, argued that there was little doubt regarding the FBI director's sexual tendencies, describing him as bisexual with failed heterosexuality. Hoover and Tolson. Hoover viewed Tolson as his alter ego. The men worked closely together during the day and, as singles, frequently shared meals, went to nightclubs, and vacationed together. This intimacy between the two guys is frequently used as evidence that they were lovers. Some FBI personnel who knew them, such as Mark Felt, claimed the relationship was brotherly. Nevertheless, former FBI Executive Assistant Director Mike Mason speculated that some of Hoover's colleagues denied having a sexual relationship with Tolson in order to protect Hoover's reputation. The novelist William Styron told Summers that he once encountered Hoover and Tolson at a California beach home, where the director was painting his friend's toenails. Harry Hay, founder of the Mattachine Society, one of the first homosexual rights organizations, claimed Hoover and Tolson sat in boxes owned and utilized solely by gay men at the Del Mar racetrack in California. Hoover left his estate to Tolson, who moved into Hoover's home after his death. Tolson accepted the American flag that was draped over Hoover's casket. Tolson is buried in Congressional Cemetery, just a few yards from Hoover. Other romantic allegations. Richard Hack, one of Hoover's biographers, believes the director was not gay. According to Hack, Hoover was romantically related to actress Dorothy Lamour in the late 1930s and early 1940s, and after his death, Lamour refused to deny having an affair with him. Hack further stated that during the 1940s and 1950s, Hoover attended social events with Lela Rogers, the divorced mother of dancer and actress Ginger Rogers, so frequently that many of their common friends anticipated the couple would marry. Pornography for blackmail. Hoover had a massive collection of pornographic material, arguably the world's largest, including films, photographs, and textual materials, with a focus on naked photos of celebrities. He allegedly utilized these for his own titillation and kept them for blackmail reasons. Cross-dressing story. Louis Rosenstiel, the founder of Schenley Industries, was a close friend of Hoover's and a major supporter to the J. Edgar Hoover Foundation. In his memoir, Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. According to journalist Anthony Summers' book Edgar Hoover, 1993, Rosenstiel's fourth wife, Susan, claims to have witnessed Hoover cross-dressing in the 1950s at all-male parties at the Plaza Hotel with Rosenstiel, attorney Roy Cohn, and young male prostitutes. Another Hoover biographer, Burton Hirsch, later confirmed this tale. Summers said the mafia had blackmail evidence on Hoover, making him unwilling to pursue organized crime vigorously. According to Summers, organized crime figures Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello received images of Hoover having sex with Tolson and used them to prevent the FBI from targeting their illicit activities. Summers also stated that Hoover was connected with Billy Byers Jr., an alleged child pornographer who produced the film The Genesis Children. Another Hoover biographer, who heard about the rumors of homosexuality and blackmail, said he couldn't confirm them, despite the fact that Lansky and other organized crime figures were frequently allowed to visit the Del Charro Hotel in La Jolla, California, which was owned by Hoover's friend and staunch Lyndon Johnson supporter Clint Murchison Sr. Hoover and Tolson also made frequent visits to the Del Charro Hotel. Summers quoted a person called Charles Krebs as claiming, "On 3 occasions that I knew about, possibly 4, boys were driven down to La Jolla at Hoover's request." Skeptics of the cross-dressing narrative refer to Susan Rosenstiel's lack of credibility. She pleaded guilty to attempted perjury in 1971 and did time in a New York City jail. Hoover's reckless and indiscreet behavior would have been completely out of character, regardless of his sexual orientation. Most biographers believe the story of mafia blackmail is improbable, given the FBI's ongoing investigations into the mafia. Although never proven, the claim of cross-dressing has been extensively circulated. According to author Thomas Doherty, for American popular culture, the image of the Zoftig FBI director as a Christine Jorgensen wannabe was too delicious not to savor. According to biographer Kenneth Ackerman, Summers' charges have been widely debunked by historians. According to journalist Liz Smith, Cohn informed her about Hoover's alleged transvestism long before it became common gossip. Lavender Scare. Roy Cohn, an attorney, served as general counsel on the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations during Senator Joseph McCarthy's chairmanship and supported Hoover throughout the 1950s communist investigations, and was widely known to be a closeted homosexual. According to Richard Hack, Cohn believed that Hoover was too afraid of his own sexuality to have a normal sexual or love relationship. Some of Cohn's former clients, including Bill Bonanno, the son of mafia lord Joseph Bonanno, have also cited images of Hoover in drag that Cohn reportedly possessed. During the Lavender Scare, Cohn and McCarthy fueled anti-communist sentiment by claiming that communists overseas had persuaded several closeted homosexuals in the United States government to leak sensitive government information in exchange for assurances that their sexual identity would remain hidden. Following a government probe, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed Executive Order 10450 on April 29, 1953, prohibiting gays from getting federal jobs. In his 2004 analysis of the event, historian David K. Johnson condemned the theories about Hoover's homosexuality as depending on the type of tactics Hoover and the security program he oversaw perfected: guilt by association, rumor, and unverified gossip. He sees Rosenstiel as a liar who was paid for her allegation, and her description of Hoover in drag engaging in sex with young blonde boys in leather while desecrating the Bible is clearly a homophobic fantasy. He feels that only people who have forgotten the severity of the decades-long fight against homosexuals in government can believe allegations that Hoover appeared in compromising positions. Friends who support you. Some persons close to Hoover have confirmed the suspicions regarding his homosexuality. According to Anthony Summers, Hoover frequented New York City's Stork Club. Louisa Stewart, an 18 or 19-year-old model, told Summers that she saw Hoover and Tolson holding hands in a limo as they went uptown to the Cotton Club in 1936. Ethel Merman, an actress and singer, had known Hoover since 1938 and was familiar with all persons involved in his purported romance with Lela Rogers. In a 1978 interview, in reaction to Anita Bryant's anti-gay campaign, she stated, "Some of my greatest friends are homosexual. Everyone heard about J.Edgar Hoover, but he was the best FBI director ever." Thank you for taking the time to engage with our content. We're delighted you enjoyed this article and would love to hear your feedback. Your feedback is really valuable to us, so please share it in the comments box below. If you're new and want to remain up to date on our latest material, subscribe to the Up First Time channel. By subscribing, you will be the first to learn about our new stories and videos, ensuring that you never miss out on any of the excitement. But we're more than just distributing material, we're also about creating a community. That is why we value your feedback so highly. If you have any recommendations or themes you'd like us to look into more, please leave them in the comments. We're always looking for new ideas and eager to hear from our viewers. And, speaking of ideas, if you're as enthusiastic about this subject or person as we are, have you considered doing a whole documentary? Your unique thoughts and viewpoints could be extremely beneficial to others, and presenting them in a documentary style could help you reach an even larger audience. This is something to think about. Finally, remember to click the like button and share this video with your friends and family. Let's work together to expand our community and welcome new members to the Up First Time family. Your support is invaluable to us, and we could not do it without you. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to continuing this great journey with you.